Everyone believed the heir to the Blackwood fortune was broken beyond repair. That was until the gardener's daughter did the unthinkable. But before we reveal the shocking truth of that afternoon, don't forget to comment down below which country you are watching from today. The iron gates of the Blackwood estate were always closed, guarding a world of manicured lawns, gray stone statues, and a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. On the edge of the property, overlooking the cold, churning waters of the Atlantic Ocean, sat Arthur. He was 14 years old, trapped in a motorized wheelchair that cost more than most people's houses. For 3 years, Arthur had been the tragic prince of this castle. A riding accident had left him paralyzed from the waist down, or at least that was what the specialists from Switzerland, New York, and London had confirmed. His mother, Lady Eleanor, a woman of steel will and endless resources, had accepted the diagnosis with a cold, terrifying grief. She had built a fortress of safety around her son, a cage of comfort where he would never be hurt again. But Mia saw things differently. Mia was 12, a scrap of a girl with messy hair and knees always stained with grass. She was the daughter of the new groundskeeper, invisible to the wealthy residents of the house. For weeks, she had been watching Arthur from behind the hedges as she weeded the rose gardens. She didn't look at him with pity like the nurses did. She looked at him with the sharp, analytical eyes of someone who had grown up on the streets, where survival depended on noticing the smallest details. She had seen things the doctors hadn't. She had seen Arthur's leg twitch when a stray cat scratched his ankle. She had seen him brace his feet against the footrest when a sudden clap of thunder shook the house. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and windy, when Mia finally approached him. Arthur was staring at the ornamental lake, a deep, freezing body of water filled with dark koi fish. "You are not broken, you know," Mia said, her voice cutting through the wind. Arthur jumped, spinning his chair around. He looked at the girl in the oversized flannel shirt with confusion. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. "I said you aren't broken," Mia repeated, walking closer, wiping dirt from her hands onto her jeans. "My grandfather fixed clocks. Sometimes a clock stops working not because the gears are broken, but because a piece of dust gets stuck in the wrong place. The machine forgets it can move. It needs a shake." Arthur frowned. "It's not a clock, it's a spinal cord injury. My mother has the x-rays." "Your mother has fear," Mia countered, standing right next to him now. She was small, but she radiated an intensity that made Arthur uneasy. "And you have fear, too. You have forgotten how to be a boy. You have become a piece of furniture in this garden." Arthur felt a flash of anger. How dare she? She didn't know the pain, the nights spent staring at the ceiling, the endless therapy sessions that yielded nothing. "Leave me alone," he snapped, turning his chair back toward the lake. But Mia didn't leave. She stepped onto the brake of his wheelchair. The click was loud in the quiet garden. "I bet you $5 you can swim," she whispered. Arthur laughed, a bitter, dry sound. "If I go in that water, I drown. That's the reality. Is it? Or is that just what they told you so you would never leave this house?" Just then, the sound of a heavy engine roared up the driveway. It was Lady Eleanor's limousine returning from the city. The crunch of gravel under the tires sounded like a judge's gavel. Arthur stiffened. His shoulders hunched up. The arrival of his mother always meant the end of freedom, the return to the medical routine, the suffocating safety. Mia looked at the car, then at the deep, dark water of the lake. She looked at Arthur's legs, thin and atrophied, but not lifeless. She knew she had about 30 seconds before security came around the corner. It was a reckless gamble. It was dangerous. It was insane. But Mia operated on instinct, and her instinct screamed that the boy needed to fight for his life to realize he still had one. Without a word of warning, without a countdown, Mia released the brake. "Hey, what are you doing?" Arthur shouted, sensing the shift in gravity. "Wake up, Clockwork Boy," Mia whispered. She shoved the wheelchair with all her might. Arthur yelled, his hands scrambling for the wheels, but the momentum was already too great. The chair tipped forward over the low stone lip of the embankment. If you are enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more stories like this. The splash was violent. The freezing water swallowed the boy and the heavy metal chair instantly. Bubbles and foam erupted on the surface, disturbing the dark peace of the lake. From the driveway, Lady Eleanor had just stepped out of the car. She heard the splash. She turned just in time to see the empty space where her son had been. "Arthur!" she screamed, a sound that tore her throat. She dropped her purse and began to run, her high heels sinking into the soft grass, moving faster than she had in years. Underwater, Arthur was in a silent, freezing hell. The wheelchair was heavy, dragging him down into the muck at the bottom. The shock of the cold was like 1,000 needles piercing his skin. Panic, pure and primal, exploded in his brain. He held his breath, his lungs burning. He looked down at his legs. They were tangled in the footrests. The chair was an anchor. He was going to die. But then, something happened. The survival instinct, the oldest code written in human DNA, bypassed his conscious mind. It bypassed the psychological walls he had built for 3 years. He felt the cold water on his calves. He felt the weight of the steel. And he kicked. It wasn't a phantom sensation. It was a muscular contraction. His right leg lashed out, pushing against the frame of the chair, then his left. He thrashed, fighting the metal beast that was trying to drown him. With a final desperate heave, he freed himself from the seatbelt. He was loose, but he was deep. His chest was screaming for air. He looked up at the shimmering light of the surface and he kicked again. Not floating, not drifting, swimming. Lady Eleanor reached the edge of the lake, ready to dive into the murky depths, ready to die to save him. But she froze. Breaking the surface with a gasp that sounded like a sob, Arthur emerged. He was flailing, coughing, spitting out pond water, but he was keeping himself afloat. His legs were churning the water beneath him, treading water. He dragged himself to the muddy bank, clawing at the grass. Mia stood there, her arms crossed, her face pale, but her eyes blazing with triumph. She didn't help him out. She let him do it. She let him pull his own weight onto the dry land. Arthur collapsed on the grass, heaving, his wet clothes clinging to his shivering frame. Lady Eleanor fell to her knees beside him, weeping hysterically, touching his face, checking his breath. "You fell! Oh my God, you fell! I have to call the ambulance!" she cried, reaching for her phone with trembling hands. "No, Mom," Arthur choked out, coughing up water. He rolled onto his back and looked at the sky. He lifted his right leg. It shook. It was weak, but it rose into the air, holding there against gravity. "I didn't fall," Arthur whispered, looking at Mia. "I was pushed." Lady Eleanor froze. She looked at the leg held in the air. The leg that hadn't moved in 3 years. Her brain couldn't process the contradiction. Her son was almost murdered, yet he was healed. She spun around to look for the culprit, for the person Arthur was looking at. "Who? Who pushed you?" Eleanor demanded, her eyes scanning the garden. But the garden was empty. The wind rustled the rose bushes. The ripples in the lake were settling. But there was no girl in a flannel shirt. Arthur sat up, his movements fluid, fueled by adrenaline. Mia was gone. She had vanished into the maze of hedges as silently as she had arrived. That evening, the Blackwood estate was lit up like a Christmas tree. Doctors, neurologists, and police officers filled the halls. They examined Arthur. They tested his reflexes. They watched in stunned silence as he stood up, holding on to the edge of the sofa, and took 3 shaky steps. The lead neurologist, a man who had written papers on Arthur's paralysis, took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "It is medically impossible," he muttered, "unless the paralysis was functional. Psychogenic." The trauma of the accident locked his mind, and his mind locked his body. He needed a counter-trauma, a shock so great it reset the system. Lady Eleanor sat in the corner, holding a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She was still shaking. She was furious that her son had been endangered, but she was overwhelmed by the miracle standing in front of her. Arthur told them about the girl. He described her, the messy hair, the dirt on her hands, the theory about the clock. The head of security frowned. "Lady Eleanor, we have checked the logs. The groundskeeper doesn't have a daughter. He is a single man, lives alone in the cottage. We have searched the entire estate. There is no child here matching that description." Arthur felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold lake water. He knew she was real. He had felt her hand on his shoulder. He had heard the click of the brake. Weeks passed. Arthur's recovery was grueling but rapid. He didn't want the wheelchair anymore. He walked with a cane, then without it. The story of the miracle at Blackwood Estate made the local news, then the national news. Lady Eleanor tried to find the girl. She hired private investigators. She put up posters in the town. She wanted to sue her, or perhaps hug her. She didn't know which, but no trace of Mia was ever found. No records, no school enrollment, nothing. One afternoon, a year later, Arthur was walking near the edge of the estate. He was strong now, tall, the color back in his cheeks. He stopped at the spot where he had gone into the water. The wheelchair was still at the bottom of the lake, left there as a monument to the past. He looked down at the flower bed where he had first seen her. There, half buried in the dirt, was a small rusted gear from an old clock. Arthur picked it up. He smiled, rubbing the dirt off the metal with his thumb. He realized then that it didn't matter if she was a ghost, an angel, or just a girl who didn't want to be found. She had been the spark. She had seen the truth when everyone else saw a tragedy. Arthur put the gear in his pocket and turned back toward the house, walking on his own 2 feet. He understood now what she had meant. We are machines of blood and bone, but sometimes we just need someone brave enough to release the brake. And as the sun set over the ocean, the boy who once thought he was broken ran back home.